Hello, this is Melissa. It is Real History on the 20th of November. We're actually recording this a week early, and we'll see how we get on here. But we have made it through 6 chapters, and I have raced ahead. I've taken the lead on this race. Nick was out front to begin with. He says he's on chapter 7 right now in his reading, and I am on chapter 13. Oh, you better hurry up. But we are both enjoying reading it. And so here we are today to talk to you about chapters 1 through 6. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Yes, I got started. I don't know how it happened, but miraculously, I just had all this time. I just found all this time to read. So I raced through the first 6 chapters and I've stalled. And now I'm kind of like grabbing minutes and seconds here and there when I can. But it's all good. And I'm really enjoying this book so far. And it's a different kind of feeling and mood. It's a bit of a shift from the first two, but it's got so much in it, so much worth commenting, and some little things that I caught that I'm interested to ask you about to see if you think they're significant or not. So yeah, very very excited to talk about it today.
All right. Well, how shall we dive in here? Um,
I think it's good to give an overview of why this is so different from the first two in the trilogy because
okay.
the first two follow a similar sort of format. It's an adventurer going to another planet, meeting um, the natives, and having a sort of experience there. And the arc of the adventure is quite similar in the first two books. In the first part of this book, it's a very different setting. It's a lot more mundane. It's a lot more everyday. It's a lot more familiar. You know, it doesn't start with a spaceship that's an orb flying to another planet. So that's quite nice. It's a different pace, and
Mhm.
we don't begin with Ransom, who was the hero of the first two. We begin with Jane and Mark, plain Jane and Mark. I really wish that C.S. Lewis had called him Joe, because when I'm doing my live streams, I'm always talking about the average Joe and Jane on the street, and I kind of have a feeling that these two kind of represent that normal everyday people who are not really plugged into anything outside the sort of mainstream uh quote unquote normal way of life. You know, you get married and you have a job and you work, and then maybe you have children in the future, and you kind of pay your taxes, and you go out shopping for hats, you know. And yeah, that's kind of the setting. So I think it's worth kind of mentioning that up front, because it's very interesting to have a third book in a trilogy that is so different to the first two. You would expect maybe more of the same, but we didn't get that at all.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I should have been absolutely riveted to everything that you were saying because that would have been polite. But I got distracted when I noticed that you're wearing black and so am I. We did it again.
Well, this I think this is a dark navy,
Oh,
so
okay.
not
Well,
not too. But
all
we
right.
went with
Well,
the dark colors somehow.
okay. It
Well,
might,
I did have a
yeah.
bright orange jumper on, but
Okay.
I was a bit too warm with the lights and everything and
All
drinking my
right.
tea, so I took that off. But yeah,
Well,
we're almost
maybe
there.
when the video renders, it will show up dark navy, but I see it. It registers black. But no, you make some good points there about the differences between this. And that was one of the reasons you said, "Oh, I'm already into it. and I hadn't started reading it. So I felt compelled to hurry up and get going. But once I did, it's more quickly readable because you're not having to learn much new language. Although I did write down some words that were new to me here. So I made a note of them, but it's grounded. And yet, at the more I go along, the more I am coming to the opinion that at the heart of this, it's a story about marriage, which I find very interesting because we went to Malacandra, which was Mars, And then we went to Paralandra, which was Venus. So men are from Mars, women are from Venus. And now
Oh
we
yeah.
have, yeah. So now we've got the earthbound relationship of man and woman, male and female. And I
And
think
isn't the very
that's,
first line of the book, um, the first chapter is matrimony was
mm-hmm,
ordained. Thirdly, said
mm-hmm.
Jane Studdock to herself, for the mutual society, help, and comfort that the one ought to have of the other. And she's kind of going through the service of and the words that were spoken in her marriage, isn't she? She's sort of reflecting on those.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, wow, that's a great point. We've got the men are from Mars, the women are from Venus, and
Right.
then
And she said she'd not been to church since her school days until she went there 6 months ago to be married. And the words of the service had stuck in her mind. Now, this is the next page on the in the novel, and this is very interesting because here we already know in the first page and a half that she is not really happily married. And she's, it says she never sees him. He's always at work. She too was an academic and was working on her thesis. I think this might be her doctoral thesis, but at any rate, she's doing postgraduate work on the poet John Donne. And she's telling herself that she's got to get some work done. But before that, she's just musing on the state of the marriage. For some years before their marriage, she had never seen so little of Mark as she had done in the last 6 months. Even when he was at home, he hardly ever talked. He was always either sleepy or intellectually preoccupied. While they had been friends, and later when they were lovers, life itself had seemed too short for all they had to say to each other. But now, why had he married her? Was he still in love? If so, quote, being in love, end quote, must mean totally different things to men and women. Was it the crude truth that all the endless talks which had seemed to her before they were married, the very medium of love itself, had never been to him more than a preliminary? Now, she gets into some interesting things here. I made a note here. She's doing her thesis on John Donne, and she's tossing this idea around in her head. Says Jane was not perhaps a very original thinker, and her plan had been to lay great stress on Donne's triumphant vindication of the body. And this theme is going to come up again in the first 6 chapters, and it will come up again even later in the book, I have noticed. So the vindication of the body. Now, I hadn't had any John Donne since many years ago, but I was giving this some thought. And no, it was his poetry was not a triumphant vindication of the body, but it was one of harmony. So that again, that's into the themes of the two planets, the male and the female. It's the marrying of mind and heart, body, soul, desire. So it's bringing those all together. And she's only focused on the physical and the body. She's missing all of that in the poetry. But then we go a little bit further down. She's had a dream and she's remembering the dream. And she remembered how she felt. And she had to sit up and not didn't want to wake Mark up. She said she put on, afraid to put on the light for fear Mark should wake up and fuss, yet feeling offended by the sound of his regular breathing. So already right there, he just annoys her. Just his breathing is annoying.
I like how
But
he's described that he was an excellent sleeper.
yes, she, I mean, personally, I underlined that because I thought that this next line is the most succinct and clever and subtle description of a unsatisfactory love life that I have ever heard. She says,
Yep.
he was an excellent sleeper. Only one thing ever seemed able to keep him awake after he had gone to bed, and even that did not keep him awake for long. I mean, is that not the most brilliant line
I
of
was surprised to read that actually because he hadn't touched much on reproduction or the even in the when he was describing the other races on Malacandra, he touched a little bit on it with the Hrossa. But yeah, I did give me a laugh. I enjoyed that line very much
yeah,
so.
yeah.
And it goes nicely with her other descriptions of marriage being something like solitary confinement a little earlier. And and then the other thing that is worth mentioning is they're 6 months into the marriage, and she says a little earlier up, or at least the narrator tells us that um, the plan was to continue her scholarly career after being married, and that was one of the reasons why they were to have no children, at any rate, for a long time yet. So they're focusing on work and career, and putting aside the the building of a family and having children. So that's just very relevant, even though this was 40, was this 43, 1943?
I think
Um,
so, yeah.
in the present day where you've got young people being kind of steered away from family and rearing children and settling down and getting married and starting families. I was just talking to you before we hit record about having traveled to London with my 4-month-old son recently. And what I noticed was he got a lot of compliments because he's quite a bonny baby, a bonny wee face. That's what my granny used to call him. She used to call him, look at that wee face, and 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 it gets a lot of compliments. Babies do, newborns, but what I notice is a lot of the compliments and attention comes from older women, and a lot of the younger generations they just don't really seem to be. They don't seem to care. They don't seem to stop
Mhm,
and cute baby or smile or cat or just grin from across the way when they cut sight. It doesn't seem to be a thing for them. On
mhm.
the whole, there's exceptions, of course. So I think he's very ahead of the curve in the this relationship that he's describing here. Either these problems were happening at the time, or he foresaw them, or he knew that the training would be coming by way of, Bertrand Russell and these other sort of social engineers um, who've brought this about to this division and this disconnect between the male and the female, the masculine and the feminine. Um, yeah, so I just thought I'd add that in, and then the
No,
dream.
that's good. And I just took a quick peek, and it was 1945, and
Okay,
I think that some of the things that come up here, it's a good example of how you get more done in 5 years of war than in 50 years of peacetime,
right.
because he is writing this, and I think he's probably seeing both in the academic world. I think he's seeing what we would could describe as a precursor to feminism. And there are many ideas that he writes here that seem so modern or really still resonate with how people feel or talk about juggling career and family and
Mm.
resentments of roles and so forth. And I think these might have been fairly fresh ideas at the time. Now we just can't
Resentment
get
of
rid of
roles is
them.
a good one.
Yeah.
There's a bit later on. So Jane, she has this dream, and it's incredibly frightening to her, and it really unnerves her and leaves her on edge and Mark's away. And then when he eventually gets home, there's a really good line about how inconvenient it is that that she's chosen this night to be
Mhm.
distressed because he's very tired and not entirely sober.
Yeah.
It's just a really good line. Like there's really good comedy in here. That
Mhm.
sort of It's almost situation comedy, that observational comedy about,
Hmm.
the relationship between a man and woman. So that was another bit that comes a bit later on.
So let's see, what else do we have here in the first? Okay, she's telling about the first terrible dream that she has. Now, what is fascinating is that she dreams about someone who's wearing a pince nez, the glasses that attach to your nose.
I didn't know
And
you pronounced it like that. I've always read it as pince nez.
well, I don't know. I
That's
mean,
good to know.
I think the French say pince nez, so
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do.
it
Yeah,
is a
because
French term. So,
yeah.
but anyway, there's those. If you want to say pince nez, that's cool. But that's what he's wearing, and we're going to learn more about this character. We'll leave him nameless for now, but the way she describes him and the fact that he's the really the first big thing that comes up in the dream. Who wore a pince nez that was big at that time? Sigmund Freud.
I was
So,
going to say Gandhi, but it wasn't a pince nez, was it, Gandhi? But he did have those little round glasses,
well,
framed glasses.
there were a few people who wore them, but one of
Oh,
them,
really?
yeah, one of them was Freud. You see
Yeah.
pictures of
Yeah.
him wearing that, and Freud at times had that pointy beard. He had a certain look, and I'm sure that he writes this character that this her dream turns into a real character in the book, and I feel like we're looking at Sigmund Freud.
Right.
That's
Nice. I hadn't
so.
picked up on that at all. That's great. It makes sense. And the other thing about this character is unnaturally uh, something that freaks her out is the unnatural perfection of his teeth.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
that's so true. When I went to we were looking at buying a new settee or sofa, and we were going around some various shops, and a gentleman came over, the salesman type. Hi, how's it going? All friendly and kind.
Oh,
The
what?
most unnaturally
Uh,
perfect teeth, and it's so unsettling and strange when they're just overly perfect and bright and shiny. And yeah, I always think that's a good catch. And there's another character who we'll talk about
I try
who
to
has
drink
who
plenty of coffee,
yeah, yeah, just to make sure
take
you
the
don't freak
shine
people
off.
out with
Yeah.
your
My mother
and
put us all in braces when we were young, get those teeth straightened up. So,
yeah,
so
yeah,
I do my part. I try to,
good, good. But it comes up again. There's another character who's I think his mouth is described as shark-like or something like that.
Yes.
So
Well, and
yeah.
also when we meet the character, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but that woman, she also
Oh
has a,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, her mouth is just kind of like a slash there. But when she has the dream, she's thinking about it, and then she tries to turn her attention back to the poet Donne. Where were we? She asks herself. And then she says, it's an ambiguous passage at the end of Love's Alchemy. Hope not for mind and women. At their best, sweetness and wit. They are but mummy posist. Hope not for mind and women, she muses. Did any man really want mind and women? But that wasn't the point. I must get back to my concentrating. So again, for her, it's going to be this mind versus body because we learn as we go on that she's not an unattractive woman. In fact, she's kind of a looker, but her attention is on her mind. And I think part of her dilemma, what she's thinking is that has she driven him away? Is there something missing because of her brains? In other words, is the spark missing because she's smart? Would he prefer it if she was not?
And then also this ability which she has. So the dreams prove to be very important. And as you mentioned, she's dreaming about real people. And it turns out she's dreaming about real events and that she has this ability of, I forget what they call it, but it's kind of foresight.
Hmm.
It's dreaming about things that are happening or are going to happen. And
Hmm.
she doesn't want this ability. She doesn't want this mental ability. You know, it's
She's
all
almost like a precog in that, what was that?
Minority Report.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And she doesn't want it. And she initially is very resistant and,
Yeah.
or at least I think, I assume she accepts it later on. I don't know. I haven't read that bit yet, but the bits I have read, she kind of runs away and like, nope, I don't want it. No, I'm
Hmm.
not interested in this. I don't want to be part of this. And yeah, it's that could be sort of seen as this rejection of her own mental powers, her own intelligence, maybe because of what you just said, thinking that that's what's causing the problem between her and her husband and the distance between them.
Hmm. Now, well, maybe we'll just carry on. I'll let you carry on with chapter one and setting it all up. And
Yes. So we get the little intro to Jane, her dream, her feelings about being married, and her attempt to return to poetry. And she struggles to concentrate. She gets frustrated, and then she just leaves without any plan or purpose or um, destination. She just leaves the house and goes out walking. And then it switches to Mark. So this is another thing that happens in this book that doesn't happen in the others. There's multiple scenes. We
hmm.
jump from place to place. There's that kind of geographical shift, and we
Hmm.
go to Mark. And Mark is a newly elected professor or scholar. I'm not sure if he's a professor or a scholar, but he's been elected to Bracton College, which is in a place called Edgetoe. And there's a little bit in the preface about how Edgetoe is I think inspired by Durham, which is a very small university city in the northeast of England. The university there is very well respected. It's very old, and I didn't apply to go there. It was a bit too posh for me. I ended up going to Liverpool, a nice dock city with all the comings and goings of a port city, right? But Durham's sort of loosely inspired this city of Edgetoe, and it's a kind of very small. It feels more like a village, and the setting's
Hmm.
quite important for what
Hmm.
happens later on. But he's all chuffed with himself. He's got this new role, and he is a sociologist. And he says he's been elected to a fellowship in that subject, and that was 5 years ago. Oh, and just on the topic of Edgetoe, the place. I don't know if it's Edgestowe, I suppose it's pronounced. It says, no maker of cars or sausages or marmalades has yet come to industrialize the country town, which is the setting of the university, and the university itself is tiny. So that's the kind of setting of the story.
Hmm.
He's a sociologist. He gets elected to a fellowship, and then he finds himself inside. Once he's in the college, he finds himself embedded and part of the progressive element.
Okay,
And it's
but
capital P, capital
before
E.
we get to the progressive element, that's really good.
Yeah.
But we'll about Bracton, which is the little college here in Edgestowe. I just love the way he described it. He said, Bracton takes no undergraduates. So these are all serious students that arrive there to get deeper into their subject matter. It was founded in 1300 for the support of 10 learned men whose duties were to pray for the soul of Henry, or Henri, however you'd say it, but Henry de Bracton, and to study the laws of England. The number of fellows had gradually increased to 40, of whom only six, apart from the Bacon professor, now study law, and of whom none, perhaps, pray for the soul of Bracton. But it's just this small little, but exclusive still.
Hmm. Yeah, and there's something significant about 10 learned men, isn't there? The
Uh-huh.
number of 10.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but
13
it
started in
started
1300 for 10 learned men to pray. Yeah.
and it's very different. And that's quite telling as well that the praying has fallen by the wayside.
Hmm.
I kind of read that as well. It's not just the prayers specifically for the soul of Bracton, but probably prayers more generally that are not happening anymore. Um, so he's in the progressive element, and there's another character called Curry, who knows Mark, and they stop and have a discussion. And what is revealed is that Mark was brought to the college by a character who becomes very important in the rest of the story called Lord Feverstone. And it's we're told that it's kind of a taboo to talk about how people get elected into the university. They don't really discuss it, except the progressive element. He says this is one of the things, one of the rules that the progressive element is happy to get rid of. And so Curry reveals that Lord Feverstone is the reason why Mark was offered this fellowship and brought in and given this role. And so Lord Feverstone turns out to be a character we've already met in the
Hmm.
first novel, who was back then, I think he just had the one word. His name was Divine.
Hmm.
It was Weston and Divine. So, quick recap: Weston went on to appear in the second novel to get possessed by the bent Oyarsa that rules over Earth, and there's a whole tussle between Ransom and Weston. Divine isn't mentioned in the second book, I don't
Hmm.
think. But here he is again. He's back, and now he's
Hmm.
a Lord, Lord Feverstone, and he's part of Bracton College, but he spends so much time in London that there's a bit of a question about what exactly is he doing and what is he up to and why is he part of the college.
Hmm.
But it turns out that Lord Feverstone, Dick Devine is his full name, is responsible for bringing Mark in. And
One little bit of a backstory too about when we meet Divine in the first novel is that the way he's written, he's everything's old boy. Do you remember that? Old boy, and he's very chummy. He's got the, school ties and everything is a ha-ha joke.
yeah,
And he's somebody who seems to have been born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Um, he just kind of floats into things. Everything's a joke and a lark, and
yeah,
so he's a fellow who gets by more on his birth and
yeah,
social
his
standing.
connections,
Yeah.
his network. Yeah, it's like he's been born into this, um, and his name and maybe his associations and connections are what get him through.
Hmm.
Uh, so Curry tells Mark, who's kind of taken off guard by this revelation. Curry tells Mark, it was Dick who insisted all through that you were the sort of man we really wanted. He went around to dukes and ferreted out all about you. He took the line that the one thing to consider is the type of man we need, and be damned to paper qualifications. And I must say, he turned out to be right,
Hmm.
which is a kind of backhand sort of uh, double, what do you call it? Backhanded compliment almost. Because he's saying, be damned to paper qualifications. The
Hmm.
insinuation is that Mark's paper qualifications weren't that good or good enough. um, and this is where it says that the progressive element is doing away with traditions. So it says, it was an old rule at Bracton, as presumably in most colleges, that one never mentioned in the presence of a man the circumstances of his own election. And Studdock, that's Mark Studdock, had not realized till now that this was also one of the traditions the progressive element was prepared to scrap. So he's part of this progressive element, and they're scrapping traditions,
Hmm.
but he feels like he's part of something important, meaningful. He's very proud. He's very happy, and he's eager to move on up and sort of leverage this position to further his career. So this is why I think he's absent from the home so often. He's doing late nights. He's attending meetings, and neglecting his marriage because he's looking at this scholarly career and his own future. Then we
Well, there's
have,
something before you
yeah,
move on. There's something else
yeah,
there. He says it never occurred to him that his own election had depended on anything but the excellence of his work in the fellowship examination. And that reminded me of a movie that Alan Watt talked about, which was Brotherhood of the Bell. It's about a secret
Oh, it's such a good
society.
film.
Yeah.
I watched
And
that just after my son was born. I was
did
going
you?
through some of the films that Alan's mentioned because we were just having a lot of downtime lying around and resting and recuperating. And I watched that one. Yeah, I thought it was really good.
So when they call in a favor of the professor in that movie, he doesn't want to do it because it's distasteful to him. And they're like, look at they're pointing out to him that his whole career has been handed to him on a silver plate. And it's really never occurred to him. That one of the characters even says to him, did you think you got all this from your hard work and brains?
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing, isn't it?
Hmm.
So it marks in for a rude awakening, that is for sure. Uh, but at this point, there's little hints as well of what's to come, which is really good. And but he presses on nevertheless. Uh, then there's a little change here, isn't there? It's quite a interesting little interlude. It switches not to another character, but to a first person account of a location that is going to be really important in the book called Bragdon Wood. And I think this is the narrator stepping in to talk.
Hmm.
Lewis, he calls himself Lewis, doesn't he, in the second book?
Hmm.
And the narrator's interviewing Ransom and then writing down the stories based on what Ransom's told him. I don't know if there's going to be a little more from the narrator in this book, but
Well, this is
we,
I came to the same conclusion too that it must be Lewis, and so far, like I'm just starting 13 and I haven't seen him again.
hmm.
So it's just a random narrator place where he describes Bragdon Wood.
And this is a really important place because what it transpires is Bragdon Wood is part of Bracton College, and it is this ancient woodland with a well at the center of it, which is called Merlin's Well. And there's a wall around this wood as well, and with a door that gets locked. And he tells us, the narrator, that he persuaded somebody to let him go in there and leave him alone for an hour to kind of explore. And what he says is, if you came in from the street and went through the college to reach it, the sense of gradual penetration into a holy of holies was very strong. So this is and then there's other places in the book where this location is referred to, or I don't know if this location specifically is referred to this or Edgestowe in general, but it's talked about as the heart of England. That phrase comes up again as well.
Hmm.
And so there's this sort of magical little wood with a well at the center of it called Merlin's Well. And this well has been very important to Bracton College for uh, a very long time. There's described a kind of ritual where all the is it the deans of college would go down there and take this ancient cup and drink a draft from this well when they get
Hmm.
appointed to the role. And time seems to shift. He talks about how it's a half a mile walk, but it seemed a long time before he got to the center of the wood. So there's this time dilation effect there as well. And some of the details about the people who've been there and the legends and the stories associated with it. But in the last part of this description, it says it's good enough evidence that the well with the British Roman pavement was already Merlin's Well, though the name is not found till Queen Elizabeth's reign, when good Warden Shovel surrounded the wood with a wall, quote, for taking away for the taking away of all profane and heathenish superstitions, and the deterring of the vulgar sort of all wakes, May games, dancings, mummings, and baking of Morgan's bread, heretofore used about the fountain, called in vanity Merlin's Well, and utterly to be renounced and abominated as a gallimaufry of papistry, gentilism, lewdness, and Duniscoll folly. I wonder if any of those were the new words that you wrote down to talk about.
Three of them.
Gallimaufry. I used to live in Bristol City and here in the UK, and there was a bar, kind of restaurant bar, called the Gallimaufry, and it had
Uh,
I never got to go there, but it had a sort of resident jazz band who would play there
Oh,
most nights and jam, and you could do the open mic and get involved. But the name always, it's such a great word. I have no idea what it means. I didn't look it up,
it means
but I
a
just,
jumble or a hodgepodge.
oh, nice.
A
Yeah.
little of this and a
Okay.
little of that. So a jumble or a hodgepodge. And, I figured Gentilism, I figured I probably could figure that one out, but I looked it up anyway because I thought, well, maybe it's gentilism. So, but I looked it up. It's an
Mhm.
obsolete word for pagan or heathen, or basically anything that's non-Jewish.
That's exactly where I went with that. I
Yep.
went with Jews and Gentiles.
hmm
Yeah.
and it says it's the also means the worship of false gods, and a secondary meaning is tribalism, devotion to one's own tribe. So that again
Mm.
would be we're Jewish, you're not. So interesting, but it says it's an obsolete word. And then dunsicle too is a great word, and it means exactly what it sounds like. Dunce like, dunce-ish, stupid.
Yeah. Dunsical folly.
Yeah.
Well, the Gentilism stood out to me because it's used again in the same paragraph a little bit further down. And then between those two uses of it is mentioned Cromwell. So just continuing with this description, so basically they're describing people who didn't want this place to be venerated or used or visited, right? So they're building a wall around it and they're saying, "Oh, you're not messing around with that Dunsticle folly and the the silly May games and all this."
hmm
But continuing with this section, not that the college had by this action renounced its own interest in the place. Old Dr. Shovel, who lived to be nearly 100, can scarcely have been cold in his grave when one of Cromwell's major generals, conceiving it his business to destroy, quote, the groves and high places, end quote, sent a few troopers with power to impress the country people for this pious work. The scheme came to nothing in the end, but there had been a bicker between the college and the troopers in the heart of Bragdon, and the fabulously learned and saintly Richard Crowe had been killed by a musket ball on the very steps of the well. He would be a brave man who would accuse Crowe either of popery or gentilism. Um, so, if I'm not mistaken, Cromwell wasn't Cromwell involved in the Jewish community somehow in either working with them or bringing them back into England after they'd been.
I believe he brought them. Let's look that one up. I believe he brought them back after they had been expelled.
Hmm. Yeah,
But
it's worth looking up because just seeing the word Gentilism used twice and then
yeah,
Cromwell as well in the middle, uh, I linked those
yeah,
three.
yeah. No, he brought them back in. So let's find out. Here we go. The resettlement of Jews in England. Oliver Cromwell played a pivotal role in the readmission of Jews to England in 1656 following their expulsion in 1290 under King Edward I. Although the traditional narrative credits Cromwell with formally readmitting the Jews, the process was more nuanced. There was no formal legal decree. But Cromwell's personal assurances and actions enabled an unofficial readmission. Evidence suggests a small Jewish community had already been present in London before 1655, living in secrecy as Spanish merchants due to fear of persecution. So, and another thing to know about Cromwell was he was a Puritan.
Mhm.
So,
So there's this effort to surround this place with a wall, stop people getting to it, but still Bracton preserves it, and the wardens of Bracton go down and drink from the well whenever they get elected. And there's a little reflection here on Merlin. Um, there's a quote about this Richard Crowe who was killed on the steps of the well. His last words, which I really love this quote, even though I don't really understand it. But marry, sirs, If Merlin, who was the devil's son, was a true king's man as ever ate bread, is it not a shame that you, being but the sons of bitches, must be rebels and regicides? Um, it's a really good quote, but I'm not quite sure what it means. But Merlin, his name comes up quite a few times, and this
Well, I
character
mean,
seems very
I wondered
important.
about that too. I stopped to consider that, and I was thinking about Cromwell as a Roundhead and the whole, because you've got the Roundheads and the what were they? The Cavaliers were the Royalists.
Mhm.
So there's a whole thing there by setting it there. Maybe there's something to be said about royalists versus roundheads, which were anti-royalists.
Mm. Yeah, it's clearly an important place. It's been touched by these sorts of civil wars and conflicts and shiftings of power, and what is going to happen to this place. And that's pretty much the end of this little interlude describing the place, isn't it? The narrator falls asleep next to the well and then gets wakened up by his friend calling to him, and that's sort of the end of that scene. Um, Anything else you wanted to add about that before we move on?
No,
Because
no, we move on to find out who wants to purchase Bragdon Wood. And it
this next
will,
bit's very important, I
yeah,
thought.
it is very important. It is. I'm going to let you describe it, but I want to say
Hmm.
here that I happen to know that on your live streams, the next book that you're going to cover is Foundations, Their Power and Influence. And it's so good. I'm going to do as many of your live streams as I can with, read along with you, even though I
Hmm.
just read it for the first time a couple of years ago. And it was one of those that Alan was always talking about. And I'm like, well, he's quoted from it a lot and talked about it, and I've never read it. And it's jaw dropping. I mean, so much about the system that we live under, it becomes clearer when you read that book. So you're going to describe the NICE, and that's an acronym, NICE, the National Institute of Coordinated Experiments. And I wrote here, Foundations, Their Power and Influence. And this is the first of three times so far I have written that in there because we see with this group how a kind of octopus like that has its hands, above government, its tentacles, its whatever they call those with an octopus. Are those tentacles or something else?
I think tentacles,
Yeah.
arms, maybe.
Yeah. That it gets into academia and it then feeds what the agenda is going to be. This is what we're going to talk about. This is what you're going to study. If someone comes to your university and they want a grant, this is what they have to be focused on if they want that grant. And all of that becomes very clear in Foundations, Their Power and Influence. And to me, that's what the NICE is all about.
100%. Yeah, C.S. Lewis, his depiction of the nice and the meetings and the people involved in it and the way they talk. It's not it's not just the nice though, because I said to you in our conversations leading up to this recording that it also quite well describes corporate working situation, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But I found descriptions and conversations in here that I've experienced myself in the corporate
Mhm,
world.
mhm.
Um,
Well, before you carry on, I'll just say something about names because you just reminded me. In academia, it's Curry who's the leader of the progressive element of the university. And the names are so important with C.S. Lewis. I wrote a list of what are the names associated with the NICE and who are the names associated with the university and Curry, to curry favor. There's
yeah,
so much brown nosing and so much of the, obsequious sucking up. And he does a great job of showing
so
that.
true.
Yeah.
And then Feverstone describes him perfectly as well at one point about why Curry is not the man they need and Mark is, and why Curry's just going to do his job. They've found the right job for him, and they know he's never going to go any further because
Hmm.
is this kind of string pulling busybody. He'll just do what he likes to do without asking too many questions about why or what is the purpose of the bigger purpose that of the thing that he's part of.
That
But
you
yeah, the
the
names.
Yeah, you mentioned busybody, and that made me think of one of the others of the progressive who was Busby.
Yeah,
Busy bee.
yeah. I've circled almost all the names. I
Yeah.
hadn't I hadn't got as far as putting them together, but they're so important. They reveal so much, and they're so well chosen. Not at all accidental. Yeah, you learn a lot just looking at the names alone. But for now, we'll talk a little bit about the nice. So it turns out that Bragdon Wood, this holy of holies in the middle of Bracton University, where Merlin's Well is, it turns out that it's being sold. And there's a college meeting which Mark's going to attend, and one of the main pieces of controversial business to be discussed is the question of selling Bragdon Wood. And then we are introduced to the NICE. It says the purchaser was the NICE, the National Institute of Coordinated Experiments. So a little bit about the NICE from the narrator. They wanted a site for the building which would worthily house this remarkable organization. The NICE was the first fruits of that constructive fusion between the state and the laboratory on which so many thoughtful people based their hopes of a better world. It was to be free from almost all the tiresome restraints. Red tape was the word its supporters used, which have hitherto hampered research in this country. It was also largely free from the restraints of economy, for, as it was argued, a nation which can spend so many millions a day on a war can surely afford a few millions a month on productive research in peacetime. The building proposed for it was one which would make a quite noticeable addition to the skyline of New York. The staff was to be enormous and their salaries princely. Persistent pressure and endless diplomacy on the part of the Senate of Edgestowe had lured the new institute away from Oxford, from Cambridge, from London. Um, at times, the progressive element in Edgestowe had almost despaired, but success was now practically certain. If the NICE could get the necessary land, it would come to Edgestowe. And this is seen by this progressive element as invigorating the system, invigorating the university, and bringing prestige and money and influence and all sorts of benefits to the location, to the university, and to Edgestowe itself. But we'll find out that this description here isn't entirely complete. There's a little more going on behind the scenes, and it's no accident that this location is going to be the site of the NICE. And so this next part of the book then goes on to describe this college meeting that Mark's part of, and this is fantastic as well because what this reminded me of, I don't know if you had the same thought, but this made me think of Rosa Quare's Behind the Green Mask, where she talks about the Delphi technique or Delphi
Yes.
technique. I don't
It
know how
may.
you if it
Yes. Yes.
and
Yeah.
it's so well written this how this happens. So
It's
I don't
per
know.
it may,
I'll hand it off to you there.
I wrote Delphi technique or Delphi how but I wrote that and the dialectic and the margin because it's a
Uh,
perfect example of how the insiders know what they want the outcome to be, and so they simply set it up to achieve that. So,
so a couple of good quotes about how this happened. Let me just find. Right. So the bursar. So basically, the first thing is they discuss all these other minor issues first in the first part of the meeting. This is a morning meeting, and then it's the final issue to be discussed before they go to lunch. That's the point that the bursar, or they go to dinner maybe. Um, I think I'm right in saying that because they all leave the room like
hmm hmm
hungry and gasping for tobacco and but it says it was not till 6 o'clock that all the business came together upon the question of selling Bragdon Wood. It was not called the sale of Bragdon Wood. The bursar called it The sale of the area colored pink on the plan, which, with the warden's permission, I will now pass round the table.
It's so underhanded, everything about it, even having them be there starving, wanting a smoke break, wanting, I mean,
Yeah.
it's perfect.
Um, this is a good bit. It, let me see. Find another quote. Oh, yeah. So moving a bit further on, he refrained from offering any advice and merely mentioned the quite astonishing figure which the nice was offering. After that, the meeting became lively. The advantages of the sale discovered themselves one by one like ripe fruit dropping into the hand. It solved the problem of the wall. It solved the problem of protecting ancient monuments. It solved the financial problem. It looked like solving the problem of the junior fellows' stipends. It
The
appeared
most
further that
important
the
thing.
nice, yeah, it appeared further that the nice regarded this as the only possible site in Edgestowe. If by any chance Bracton would not sell, the whole scheme miscarried, and the institute would undoubtedly go to Cambridge. Um, and what's relevant about these other issues? So the three issues or four issues mentioned there are the ones that they've been describing and talking about up to this point. And is the wall around the wood is in disrepair, and they talk about we've got to repair it and put where's the money going to come to repair this wall, and are we going to put some barbed wire around it? And then this discussion about barbed wire is cheap, but it's going to look horrible, and it's going to be a bit of a disservice to this wonderful place if we cover it in barbed wire. And then the junior fellows stipends as well. That's another question that they discuss in the lead up to this. So they've planned the order of all these issues and the timing of them so that when this question comes up, the very natural answer will be, well, if we sell off Bragdon Wood to the nice, that's going to solve all these other issues that we've been failing to agree upon and fix in the first part of the meeting. And so when people leave, did I underline that bit? There's a bit where it talks about them leaving and the the motion was carried.
There was going to be one objection. You see, you've got the progressive element, but there were the diehards, and the diehards, they
Yeah.
didn't want change. That you could call them conservative. They took their time with things. They liked a more academic and less political environment. And so there's an old man. He's a diehard, Canon Jewel, and he starts when it goes to vote. He's going to raise an objection and they just basically shut him down. They don't even
Yeah.
let him speak. They interrupt him and badger him until he just backs down. And so, the moderator said, if Canon Jewel wishes us not to hear his views because they've been so loud he can't be heard now, I suggest that his end could be better attained by silence.
That's
Jewel,
Feverston, actually,
is
isn't it,
that
that says
Feverson
that?
that said that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jewel had been already an old man in the days before the First War, when old men were treated with kindness, and he had never succeeded in getting used to the modern world. And he just gave up in helplessness. But I thought that was such a sad line.
Yeah.
He's an elderly man. He's just been shut down, and he doesn't even know he doesn't even know how to be in a world in which there's so little respect.
Yeah. Yeah, that whole section is really good. There's so many good quotes here. Um it talks about when this item is first discussed, the description that C.S. Lewis gives is what all this actually amounted to never became clear. They remembered fighting hard at previous meetings against the Nice and all its works and being defeated, but every effort to find out what their defeat had meant, though answered with great lucidity by Curry, served only to entangle them further in the impenetrable mazes of the university constitution and the still darker mystery of the relations between university and college. So they're kind of being what's the phrase? Bullshit baffles brains, and they're trying to fight back and they're trying to ask questions and put up some sort of resistance, but they're being, I suppose, there's a word for this where you are speaking eloquently and persuasively, but you're not actually using logic. You are, what's the word for that? Not Philistine. Sophistry. I feel like they're being defeated with sophistry here and
Uh-huh.
distracted,
Uh-huh.
and this is what comes up later when we actually meet some of the people who work in Nice, and Mark's trying to get an answer to a very simple question and struggling massively because this is the way they all deal and talk with each other in these vagaries, in this what I kind of call corporate language that doesn't really ever say anything, even though people do a lot of talking. It's quite vague and open to interpretation, and it's deliberately that way.
Hmm.
So that's another good quote I thought about this meeting. And the other bit was it was just about how the junior fellows had been left with the idea that it was either going to be them losing their stipend or something else, right? The way this works is people are left with impressions. They're not told anything
Hmm.
explicitly, it's this or
Hmm.
this, but they leave the meeting having been handled and managed in such a way that they have an impression about something, and that sets them up to make the decision that the
Hmm.
people who are managing them want. It's
Yeah.
hard to describe.
Well, it is very Delphi technique. It is
Hmm.
because you've got the plants and they are the ones who they've got their and each plant has just the one thing they're focused on. And you saw this beautifully. So the person who's for it is a plant, the person who's against it is a plant, and they know when to speak and how much to push it. And then, yeah, it was really good.
We're still on chapter one, so maybe we should move on a
Well,
little
I
bit.
know I'm having the same thing. I'm already in chapter two, though. I'm in
Okay.
I'm in chapter two, and the very first note that I made on chapter two is my page 36. Again, this is foundations, their power and influence. The very first time I heard of interlock or interlocking was in Foundations, Their Power and Influence. And this is Curry, who is talking about the nice. And he said, the nice marks the beginning of a new era, the really scientific era. Up to now, everything has been haphazard. This is going to put science itself on a scientific basis. There are to be 40 interlocking committees sitting every day, and they've got a wonderful gadget. I was shown the model last time I was in town by which the findings of each committee print themselves off in their own little compartment on the analytical notice board every half hour. This is like computerization too, if you look at it. Then that report slides itself into the right position where it's connected up by little arrows with all the relevant parts of the other reports. A glance at the board shows you the policy of the whole institute actually taking shape under your eyes. There will be a staff of at least 20 experts at the top of the building working this notice board in a room rather like the tube control rooms. It's a marvelous gadget. The different kinds of business all come out in the board in different colored lights. It must have cost 500,000. They call it a pragmatometer, and it's a whole new field of study. Pragmatometry. It's so
Yes.
pragmatic.
Yeah, that's great. That whole description, I'd highlight the whole thing as well. And then there's a Busby as well says the objects of the nice. First, it's the first attempt to take applied science seriously from a national point of view. Um, and then he also says that I think this is Feveston or Mark. We're going to get science applied to social problems and backed by the whole force of the state, just
Hmm.
as war has been backed by the whole force of the state in the
Hmm.
past. So it's interesting that they've twice now there's been this comparison between war and the goals of the nice. Firstly, it was the funding. Well, if you can fund the war, you can fund some scientific research, right? And then here again, putting the whole force of the state behind this, behind science, and we'll find out who that's going to be turned on a little later from another character. But one of the things I wanted to mention as well is just a bit earlier in this chapter. So what's happened is Mark gets invited to go and spend the day in a sort of nice headquarters that's being set up. Feverstone picks him up, takes him on this white knuckle drive through the countryside. Is that this bit or not? Are they still? Is this before he's actually gone there?
I
Um,
I
Might be before he's gone there, is it?
I'm not sure. I didn't make a note of that.
Yeah, sorry, I think he's not actually gone there
Yeah.
yet. He's just sort of still talking to the progressive element and Feverstone, and they're giving the rundown about the nice and what it is. Um, Feverstone reveals a lot in this chapter, and they're talking about the different subjects that they study, and Feverstone's kind of praising Mark and telling him, "Oh, we need a sociologist." Um, and then they're talking about Busby, and Busby's a military history major or professor, and Feverstone's forgotten that. He doesn't even know what his topic is, and then Busby corrects him, and then Feverstone it goes military history, said Feverstone gently, but this time Busby did not hear him. What would any book on economics be compared with a thing like that? He continued. I look upon it as the greatest triumph of practical idealism that this century has yet seen. And that phrase, practical idealism, stood out to me as well and pops
Hmm.
up again about a page and a half later as the name of a book written by uh, Coudenhove von Kalergi.
Hmm.
And I just did a quick search for it earlier to double check that that was the name of the book because, my memory's not that good. I want to check. And I went to the Wikipedia page of practical idealism, and Kalergi's not mentioned there, which I thought was quite interesting. But if you go to Kalergi's Wikipedia page, he does mention this book, and it's quite an infamous book for the sort of predictions that it makes about Europe and what's going to happen to the people.
Hmm.
It kind of predicts mass migration and the mixing of different peoples and
Hmm.
intermarrying, and
Hmm.
and it's quite a it gets a lot of scrutiny, a lot of mention. Does this book? But it was just unusual to see that pop up twice. So that book,
Yeah.
the Practical Idealism book, came out very early 1900s. And this would have been so I don't know if that was a deliberate reference or not, but then I looked up practical idealism and there's other it was a well-used phrase and it's attributed to Gandhi. That's why I mentioned Gandhi earlier in the video because I'd spotted he's used it and
Hmm.
some other people as well. But just it just could be a kind of nod or a wink to that bigger, broader plan um of what was in store for Europe for this part of the world. And what was planned by these big organizations and institutes and foundations, right?
Yeah, I think that when Feverstone is discussing this with Mark and kind of vaguely outlining why Mark might be the right fellow for the job, who's a sociologist, right? He said, man has got to
Yeah,
take charge of man.
yeah.
That means, remember, that some men have got to take charge of the rest.
And what did you put in the? Did you put anything in the
No, I
margin for
didn't.
that?
No, I didn't. What
I
did you
put
put?
wild men because that's
Charles Galton
Charles Galton
Darwin.
Darwin.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
So
Yeah, no, that's it. You're exactly right. Yep. And so they're saying that's why you and we want to be the people who are taking charge, not the ones who are taken charge of. And Mark said, well, what kind of thing have you in mind? Here's Feverstone's reply. It's worth reading in full, I think. Quite simple and obvious things at first. The sterilization of the unfit, liquidation of backward races. We don't want any dead weights. Selective breeding. Then real education, including prenatal education. By real education, I mean one that has no take it or leave it nonsense. A real education makes the patient what it wants infallibly, whatever he or his parents try to do about it. In other words, real education, there's nothing that you can do in the face of it. Nothing
That's
can
Bertrand
overcome it.
Russell. That's
Yep,
science, impact of science on society, isn't it?
absolutely. Of course, it'll have to be mainly psychological at first, but we'll get on to biochemical conditioning in the end and direct manipulation of the brain. But this is stupendous, Feverston. It's the real thing at last, a new type of man, and it's people like you who've got to begin to make him. Now, Mark does the kind of normal natural thing here and says, well, how are you, how are you going to do that? And well, we want you to write this up. You don't mean you want me to write up all this. No, we want you to write it down to camouflage it. So, so he's really kind of giving him the hint there that his job is to be publicist, propagandist, not the truth teller. And also, he said, like, for instance, if it were even whispered that the nice wanted powers to experiment on criminals, then you'd have all old women of both sexes up in arms yapping about humanity, call it re-education of the maladjusted, and you'd have all of them slobbering with delight about the brutal era of retributive punishment as has at last come to an end. Odd thing is, the word experiment is unpopular, but not the word experimental. So he's really telling him how he's going to do his job. He said, and then he goes on, this is Bertrand Russell.
Yeah.
You mustn't experiment on children, but offer the dear little kiddies free education in an experimental school attached to the nice, and it's all correct.
It's staggering. Some of the things he says a little bit earlier too. He talks about how he frames this as a you're either with us or against us. He says if you try to be neutral, you simply become a pawn.
Yeah.
It's up to us to choose the right side. So he
Uh-huh.
frames this as a kind of war. He also says that once he's talking about getting Mark to camouflage this information. He says, once the thing gets going, we shan't have to bother about the great heart of the British public. We'll make the great heart what we want it to be. And
Mm-hmm.
I've put remold it nearer the heart's desire next to that,
Mm-hmm.
which is the
Mm-hmm.
Fabian window, and
Mm.
and the quote on the first page of First Global Revolution. It's the same quote and used in both places. And so, what did you think about Jules?
Well, I thought that
Who did you think that
Jules,
was?
first, I thought Julian Huxley, and then I thought
Ah,
Aldous, and then I thought it was a blend of Julian and Aldous Huxley. And then finally, I put H.G. Wells.
I put H.G. Wells. Yeah,
And I think
yeah.
it's H.G. Wells really because C.S. Lewis was friends with H.G. Wells, but he was also in direct opposition to everything that H.G. Wells was promoting. And there are records of him
Mm.
trying to bring H.G. Wells, like, well, hey, old chap, I like you, but your ideas are awful, and they're awful for humanity. And yeah, so I think he really was writing about H.G. Wells there. That
Yeah, so like what the mention is I thought Jules was the head of the nice and then
Mhm.
Feverston. Jules, hell's bells.
Yeah.
You don't
And
imagine that little mascot has anything to say as to
yes,
what
and
really
that's
goes
got
on.
to be H.G. Wells' little. And then
He's
he
all right for
describes him as a scientific popularizer.
yes, that's
Yeah.
it. That's it.
Yeah. So
And
definitely
he says
HG.
there's nothing in his head except some 19th century socialist stuff. And it was that what that
Yeah.
gave it away as well because
Yeah.
his association with Fabian socialism. So
Yeah. Yeah. No,
yeah.
I had to write it down and then think again. And then I'm like, oh no, 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 no. It's H.G. Wells.
I wonder if it's worth just quickly recapping. Nothing that much really happens with Jane at this point, does it?
Oh,
The
she
big
has her first
reveals.
premonition.
She has a premonition. She meets the Dimbles. they're very nice to her, and that's yeah, that's the naming again, isn't it? The people
Hmm.
who turn out to be a sort of in opposition to the nice have these kind of Harry Potter sort of names, don't they? Like
They
Dimple.
do. Uh-huh. And I looked up Dimble. It's a ravine with a water course in it.
Oh,
Yeah.
it also sounds like Dimple as
It
well.
does. It
Thimble,
does.
dimple, thimble, dumpling.
Hmm.
It's just got all these. Yeah. So Jane kind of meets the Dimbles and talks about her dream, and they suggest that they look alarmed because of the description of this what happens in Jane's dream, and be they seem to understand the dream more than she does, and
Hmm.
suggest that she goes to talk to Miss Ironwood um, before going to talk to any other psychiatrist or psychologist or doctor about this, because Jane thinks she's got some sort of affliction and she needs to go see a professional and get some help with it. Um, and so, yeah, she spends the day with the Dimbles and then comes home. That's when Mark says, Mark gets home and she's very distressed and she's had this horrible day. And he says, it was a pity, he thought, that this should have happened on a night when he was so late and so tired and, to tell the truth, not perfectly sober.
Yeah, with Miss Ironwood, as I wrote down my side by side, the thing with the nice is that as we get to know over the course of the novel, we get to know the characters who are associated with the nice. They are all hard, cold, metallic sounding names or wintry, Frost, Steel,
Mm,
Hardcastle. I may have missed a couple in there. And then when we are with the Dimbles, we're introduced to Miss Ironwood. Now, at first, that sounds like a hard name, but it's softened by wood. So
hmm.
I looked up ironwood, and ironwood is a wood that has a density greater than water. And I thought, okay, it's natural. It's just going to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the real key differences. He was so careful with every choice that he made with words and names.
So that's basically chapter two. Oh, and that's where there's the white knuckle car ride is the end of chapter two as well, where Mark agrees to go with Feverston to the nice. I think it's a kind of headquarters. They have a temporary headquarters set up in a blood bank or something, don't they?
Hmm.
Um,
Which is,
and he picks him up in the car and then drives like an absolute maniac, cursing the grannies and the animals and things that he nearly hits. Blood transfusion office, that's it. It's a temporary abode for the nice, and so you're already thinking vampires and uh,
mhm.
predators. Um, Meanwhile, so he goes on this white knuckle car ride with Feverston, aka Dick Devine, to the blood transfusion office where the nice is set up his headquarters. And Jane takes a nice leisurely train ride through the countryside to the village of St. Anne's um, to go visit her friends, is it? Or is it to go visit the people that the Dimbles ask her to go and visit? I forget now. She goes to have a nice picnic, doesn't she? But that's basically the end of chapter two.
I think her isn't her nice picnic with the Denistons.
Yes.
Okay, now I'm going to foreshadow something without explaining it. Mrs. Deniston is Camilla, and we'll let that one sit with you. And Mr. Deniston is Arthur. So there's a little bit in those names that are important. But yeah, she goes to have a little picnic with the Denistons.
Mhm. So that brings us to chapter three. And this is where Mark is first introduced to the deputy director of the NICE, Mr. John Wither.
Hmm.
And this is quite an amazing these exchanges and these experiences that he has here. So what sort of happens is he gets there and there's really no clear there's no desk waiting for him. There's no clear offer of a job. There's nothing. There's no contract. There's nothing defined. There's just he's been brought along by Feverstone. He gets introduced to the deputy director, who kind of says a lot of vague stuff about how happy he is to have Mark there and how he's part of the family and he's among friends and the Nice is a very happy family. And then when Mark tries to press him on what is the exact nature of the work. This is another fantastic piece of writing. Um, and he has to press him and ask multiple times, and then Mr. Wither eventually kind of relents and answers, and he says, "Well," said Mr. Wither in a voice so low and rich that it was almost a sigh, "I am very glad you have raised this issue now in a quite informal way. Obviously, neither you nor I would wish to commit ourselves in this room in any sense which was at all injurious to the powers of the committee. I quite understand your motives and respect them. We are not, of course, speaking of an appointment in the quasi-technical sense of the term. It would be improper for both of us, though you may well remind me in different ways to do so, or at least it might lead to certain inconveniences. But I think I can most definitely assure you that nobody wants to force you into any kind of straight waistcoat or bed of Procrustes. We do not really think among ourselves in terms of strictly demarcated functions, of course. I take it that men like you and me are, well, to put it frankly, hardly in the habit of using concepts of that type. Everyone in the Institute feels that his own work is not so much a departmental contribution to an end already defined as a moment or grade in the progressive self definition of an organic whole. And it is just some of the most amazing waffle that you will
Yeah,
ever see written down.
yeah.
And that last bit when I was rereading it just earlier reminded me of this self definition of an organic whole. I just wrote hive. It's a kind of a
Hmm.
hive mind, and it's this collectivist hive mind Borg type of assimilation where you become like in any large corporation or organization, the people at the very top know what it's all about and where it's going,
Hmm.
but you just get a function, you get a team to work in or a department, um, and you just have to sort of get busy
Hmm.
and sort of look like you know what you're doing and step up and do the things when somebody asks you to do something.
Yeah.
It's just such an amazing representation of what working in a large corporation is actually like. And Mark even says reflects that a perfectly direct question would have sounded a crudity in that room, with a warm and almost drugged atmosphere of vague yet heavily important confidence in which he was gradually being enfolded.
Hmm.
It's brilliant. It's just a fantastic description.
It really is. And, there's something else too. I didn't write down hive, nor did I think about it, but that's a very good term. And later, as we go through these first chapters, though, the hive concept builds. And I noticed that I wrote down a different word. And then when it came up again, I wrote down yet a different word. So the hive becomes more sinister,
Mm.
but it still is always a hive, first and foremost.
So there's another important name, William Hingest, right?
Yes.
So did you read that with a J, like hinge, as
Well,
in a door hinge?
at first I did with a G, a hard hingest. And I
Right.
kept reading, but then as I was studying the names, because he's also known as Bill the Blizzard.
Yeah.
And when we're introduced to him, he's he's not loving the nice, so he's there, he's meeting with them, but he's kind of calling a spade a spade. He doesn't like all that waffly stuff. So then, as I thought about his name, I said Hingest, Hing. Oh no, it hinges. So much of everything hinges on Bill the
Yeah,
Blizzard. Yeah.
yeah, that's what I came to think of it as well. So this is a moment. This is a moment where uh Mark's journey as well hinges on Hingest in this conversation with him because he runs into him and they know each other and he's surprised to find out that Hingest is working there. And Hingest drops a few clues that all might not be as it seems, and Mark might want to be cautious. And this is where he uses he uses the term heart of England, and he talks about the nice turning the heart of England into a cross between an abortive American hotel and a glorified gasworks. Hinges says he's had enough of it and he's going to leave. And Mark's surprised and he says, well, it doesn't matter for an old fellow like me, but they could play the devil with you. And so he gives him this warning. Um, but Mark seems to persevere and persist. And then he's introduced to a fellow called Steele. And the moment comes, which a lot hinges on, where Hingest invites Mark. He says, well, if you do want to come back, I'm leaving. You can get the car with me, and I'm going to be driving back to Edgestowe tonight. But Mark doesn't take him up on that offer.
Okay,
Totally.
there's something else here too, is that Steele is the one that Jane dreamed of, who was wearing the pince nez or the pince nez, and he is the Freud-like character, or at least to me, that's who I envision is a Freud-like character.
And he's in charge of the sociology department.
Uh-huh.
So that's why Mark is introduced to him. And then Steele whistled at this. He says, I say, Cosser, listen to this. Feverston has just unloaded this chap on our department, taking him straight to the DD without saying a word to me about it. What do you think of that? And so this is Mark's dilemma, is because nobody else apart from the director and Feverston seem to be aware of him and his role and that he's supposed to be there. Everyone else is
Mhm.
surprised. They don't know who he is. They don't have a place or a role waiting for him as
Right.
such. And it's kind of quite exasperating for Mark because he's just being tossed around and sent from person to person. And he meets another character called Philostrato who tells him, don't listen to Steele and Cosser, and everyone talks a lot of nonsense. You can't decide you can't take it seriously, but the goodwill of the director's on your side, so that's fine. Um, and then he meets Miss Hardcastle, and this character was, I mean, let's just some of the words to describe Miss Hardcastle, right? A bust that would have done credit to despite a bust that would have done credit to a Victorian barmaid. She was thickly built. Her hair was cropped short.
It was
Her face,
iron gray, don't
iron
forget.
gray.
It was
Yeah,
iron
her
gray and
iron
cropped
gray
short.
hair. Her face was square, stern, and pale, and her voice deep. A smudge of lipstick laid on with violent inattention to the real shape of her mouth was her only concession to fashion, and she rolled or chewed a long back cheroot unlicked between her teeth. And then she sits down and she pulls a chair over to Mark and flings her right leg over one of the arms.
And I don't know, but isn't a cheroot, isn't that like a little cigar?
I think so. Yeah,
Like
I was imagining because it says unlit, so I thought a cheroot, a little cigar, or a cigarette of some kind. But she never lights it. She just munches on it.
yeah, it's a filterless cylindrical cigar with both ends clipped during manufacture.
Aha.
So it's a cigar chomping. Oh, I love it. Now, the thing that we have to know right away is that he's warned, Mark is warned not to make an enemy of Miss Hardcastle.
Yeah.
And he said, uh, do not have the fairy for your enemy. For the rest, you laugh at them. Mark says, the fairy? Yes, her. They call the fairy. And she's the head of the internal police department of the Nice. And the fairy is possibly the only term that C.S. Lewis could use in 1945 to describe what he's giving us as the head of the police department. But yeah, she's choice.
And she actually reveals a lot as well. They
Mhm.
strike up. She kind of takes Mark under her wing, and a little bit further on, I've skipped ahead a little bit here past the next section with Jane,
That's okay. We can.
where where Miss Hardcastle's talking to him, and it says he had the sense of getting in. So up until this point,
Hmm.
nobody's really brought him on board. And she tells him all these amazing stories about how she's been a suffragette and a pacifist and a fascist, how she's been manhandled by the police and imprisoned. But on the other hand, she'd met prime ministers, dictators, and famous film stars. All her history was secret history. And she says, here in the Institute, we're backing the crusade against red tape. Mark gathered that for the fairy, the police side of the Institute was the really important side. It existed to relieve the ordinary executive of what might be called all sanitary cases, a category which ranged from vaccination to charges of unnatural vice, from which, as she pointed out, it was only a step to bringing in all cases of blackmail. As regards crime in general, they had already popularized in the press the idea that the Institute should be allowed to experiment pretty largely in the hope of discovering how far humane remedial treatment could be substituted for the old notion of retributive or vindictive punishment. That was where a lot of legal red tape stood in their way. So experimenting on prisoners and reconditioning them and Pavlovian type, Delgado type experiments.
Hmm.
The fairy says, there are only two papers we don't control, and we'll smash them. You've got to get the ordinary man into the state in which he says sadism automatically when he hears the word punishment, and then one would have carte blanche. And what she's saying is like instead of punishment, instead of being hanged or electrocuted or put in prison, we can take these people in and experiment on them and
Hmm.
condition them. And
Hmm.
the reasoning is that remedial treatment can have no fixed limit. It could go on till it had affected a cure, and those who were carrying it out would decide when that was. And if cure were humane and desirable, how much more prevention? Soon, so then you're getting into your precog, pre-crime, right?
Hmm.
Prevention. Soon anyone who had been born in soon anyone who had ever been in the hands of the police at all would come under the control of the nice. In the end, every citizen. And that's where you and I come in, Sonny, added the fairy, tapping Mark's chest with her forefinger. That reminded me of Rothschild and King, formerly known as Prince Charles, that famous picture. There's no distinction in the long run between police work and sociology. You and
Yeah.
I have got to work hand in hand.
Hmm.
Um,
And
and then,
this is great, and I love too that she wants to make sure that there's no such thing as punishment. You see, the crime gets a punishment, but hers, when the common man says sadism, that's when we will have done our work. It's just going to
mhm,
be never ending receiving of the worst kind of treatment because that's what they're going to do. And I'm like, wow, yeah, that's pretty brilliant.
yeah, yeah, it's and that ties back to Feverstone talking earlier as well about the difference between experiment and experimental, right?
Uh-huh.
It's all here. It's amazing how much of the agenda is in these two chapters and
Oh,
probably
yeah.
further on as
Yeah.
well. Um, so she gives Mark some advice. I think this is Mark. Yeah, she gives Mark the advice. Don't be too particular about what exactly you've got to do. You'll find out as it comes along. Wither doesn't like people who try to pin him down. Uh, the game's too fast just at present for that sort of thing. You've got to make yourself useful and don't believe everything you're told.
Hmm.
And then he goes to dinner and he finds himself next to Hingest again and says, I'm going back. Who says, I'm going back tonight. I could give you a lift. He says, I came here because I thought it had something to do with science. Now that I find it's something more like a political conspiracy, I shall go home. I'm too old for that kind of thing, and if I wanted to join a conspiracy, this one wouldn't be my choice. There are no sciences like sociology, and if I found chemistry beginning to fit in with a secret police run by a middle aged virago who doesn't wear corsets, and a scheme for taking away his farm and his shop and his children from every Englishman, I'd let chemistry go to the devil and take up gardening again. He says, Mark tries to justify very weakly I think again because he's kind of a weak guy, is Mark, isn't
Hmm.
he? In
Hmm.
his, he never stands up. He never has a real strong, forceful voice. He kind of gets pushed around by the people, and he says, "Oh, he kind of does this half-hearted kind of objection. Oh, I think I do understand the sentiment, but when you come to study the reality as I have to." And then Hinge says, I should want to pull it to bits and put something else in its place. Of course, that's what happens when you study men. You find mares' nests. I happen to believe that you can't study men. You can only get to know them, which is quite a different thing.
Hmm.
Because you study them, you want to make the lower orders govern the country and listen to classical music, which is balderdash. You also want to take away from them everything which makes life worth living, and not only from them, but from everyone except a parcel of prigs and professors. But I like that idea of when you want to study something, that's the, that's the just what do you call it where they chop animals up to see what happens inside them while they're
Vivisection.
alive. That's it, vivisection. That's
And
the word.
and
Thank you.
C.S. Lewis was very much against it, and that's going to come up here too. He
Mm.
the whole that whole it was well documented that he was out of favor with quite a handful of scientists in his academic career because he just wasn't on board with that.
Right. And that's, I think we talked about that in Out of the Silent Planet,
Yeah.
because Divine and Western are um looking to do that to the natives. And then you even have the possessed Western ripping the backs off the frogs in Perelandra,
Yes. And I'll
tossing
tell you
them to one
something else
side.
too. Just yesterday, I was trying to pick out something to play Sunday. And by the time you all see this with me and Nick, I will have played what I picked to go up on Sunday. And it's just happens to be a coincidence that Alan is talking about this kind of experimentation on animals. I didn't choose it for that reason. I was looking for something that had to do with Conference of the Parties and climate change. And that came up, and I thought, oh, that's perfect because this is going to come up several times in this novel as his uh, horror at that kind of experimentation.
The
Now,
synchronicity is funny as well because I had one that I was talking to you about. I'd gone back to listen to the most recent of Alan's talks, starting with the most recent and working my way back. And about the fourth to last one he ever did, he talks about That Hideous Strength, an article called That Hideous Strength, which is in
mhm,
reference to the UN.
mhm.
And it was so amazing that I was reading That Hideous Strength, and I'd never heard, I don't think, Alan talk about C.S. Lewis
Yeah.
or these books. For me to just come upon that particular talk, I was like, wow, it's amazing when these little synchronicities, these little winks from the universe
Yes.
kind of
Yeah.
occur.
Yeah. I like that. Now, I want to, this is literary criticism coming up here. But after this conversation with Hengist, Fairy Hardcastle says, Bill, that's Bill the Blizzard, Hengist. Is it true that you're going off by car immediately after dinner? Yes, Miss Hardcastle, it is. I was wondering if you could give me a lift. I should be happy to do so, said Hengist in a voice not intended to deceive, if we're going in the same direction. She asks, where are you going? I'm going to Edgestowe. Will you be passing Brinstock? No, I leave the bypass at the crossroads just beyond Lord Holywood's front gate, and I go down to what they used to call Potter's Lane. I wrote immediately after I read that, I wrote in the margin, he will be killed.
Really?
Yep. And
No way.
yes, I said he will be killed. And I understand that, I have a little bit of an insider track there, but that's what they call telegraphing. And I'm like, oh, C.S. Lewis, you telegraphed what's coming up. I just know it. And
How
in
did
fact,
you
he
get that?
did. Because this is a piece of information that is not necessary.
Yeah, I see. I see. I see.
It's
Yeah.
not necessary for him to say, I'm going this way. And it's like, oh, that whole thing was Hardcastle's fishing trip so that she can send her henchmen out to kill him. This is a telegraph.
I'm so impressed you picked that up. I didn't at all.
And then I
That's
was I
great.
was I was thinking about, I was thinking, okay, all right, I'll cut you some slack, CS, because you're not a mystery writer. But
Yeah.
your clues have to be really subtle. Otherwise, you end up like, Agatha Christie, God forbid, who saves everything. Well, we saw the butler at the last minute of the story. It's like, and then and it's like, no, 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 Agatha, you got to drop those clues so that we can solve the crime along with you.
Yes, yes, exactly. Did she not? I've never read Agatha Christie, but I saw a series recently. It was 6 or 7 part series, and it had this mystery. And I had the same complaint. Like there was no way you could figure it out until
Mm-mm.
what they revealed in the penultimate episode.
Hmm.
And I was like, that's not how you do it. You have to give us a chance to solve it ahead of
Yeah.
time, right? So yeah, that's it.
So
Yeah, I didn't pick up
his
on that,
his
but
crime was not quite the same. He just left such a huge clue for me. And then
mhm.
later on, when yes, and there you go, spoiler alert, Hen just gets killed by
and
Hardcastle's goons.
Mark's Jane dreams about it. That's the other
Yes,
thing as well. She
yeah.
she dreams that this is going to happen. Then of course it
Hmm.
happens, and that's sort of her storyline arc is including these dreams and interpreting them and the revelations and these group that she gets introduced to who recognize this power and but yeah the thing that he says though Hingest before he drives away I like this little exchange he has with Mark which is he says you'll do yourself no good by getting mixed up with the nice and by God you'll do nobody else any good either.
Hmm.
Mark says I suppose there are two views about everything. Eh? Two views? There's a dozen views about everything until you know the answer. Then there's never more than one. But it's no
Okay,
affair of mine. Good night.
that is a brilliant line. I gave that a hard underline, and it goes back
Yeah,
at the preface. At the preface, you've got C.S. Lewis. I think it is. It's either C.S. Lewis or someone else writing about that hideous strength. It is
I think
C.S.
it is
Lewis.
C.S. Lewis
Yeah.
because Christmas Eve he wrote it as well,
He
1943
writes.
it says.
Sorry, I said that hideous strength, but he writes it about abolition of man. And I haven't read Abolition of Man yet, but I just wanted to take a peek at that. It says that he is writing about poetry as a defense of objective value and natural law. And C.S. Lewis in there is positing that moral relativism threatens humanity. And I thought, oh, that's perfect. What a perfect, coming back to this line, there are a dozen views about everything until you know the answer. Then
Yeah.
there's never more than one.
I literally wrote objective truth in the margin there next to that, but
Ah, well,
yeah,
good.
go that really I really like that line.
Hmm.
And
All
that's the end
right.
of chapter 3.
That is, well,
Yeah.
let's roll. We have 20 minutes to cover 4, 5, and 6.
I could do we got half an hour. I could
Yeah.
even stretch it to 35 or 40 minutes, I
All right.
think.
Well,
But
we'll see.
yes,
Okay.
we should probably pay a little attention to Jane. I feel like we're totally
Well,
neglecting the book. It's the insight into the nice and the experiences and the characters that is really the most amazing thing about this book to me is how he's captured that mindset, what they want to do, that elitist sort of managerial, technocratic, scientific expert view on wanting to manage and control absolutely everything. He just captures it perfectly, and it's so entertaining and fun to read as well at the same time.
it is.
That I
And
kind
well,
of
we are going to get more into Jane in chapter 4.
yes,
And
yes, you're right actually.
so that's okay. She's going to Mrs. Dimble comes to stay for a little while at her house, at Jane's house. And
Good quote.
yeah.
Jane found Mother Dimble an embarrassing person to share a room with because she said prayers. It was quite extraordinary, Jane thought, how this put one out. One didn't know where to look, and it was so difficult to talk naturally again for several minutes after Mrs. Dimble had risen from her knees. And this is a nice connection
Yeah.
back as well to the people who'd stopped the Bracton learned men who'd stopped praying.
Hmm. Yeah. No, that's good. That's a good one. So she then tells about the dream, her premonition dream, or her dream that that Bill the Blizzard Hingist has been killed.
Mhm.
And so that's and then then there is the news. Does that filter back here, right here, that he's been killed? Has that gotten back to the nice? I
I
mean,
don't
the
think
nice is the
so.
ones who arranged it, but I don't know if it got
Yeah, I'm trying to remember this
see.
bit because it flicks back to Mark and he's
Yeah,
meeting Mr. Strake. I forget. I can't even remember who Mr. Strake is.
I forgot. It's an ugly name, but I forgot what's going on there too. Um,
There's a conversation about Jesus and theology and the kingdom of God. And theology, said Mr. Strake with profound contempt. It's not theology I'm talking about, young man, but the Lord Jesus. Theology is talk, eyewash, a smokescreen, a game for rich men. It wasn't in lecture rooms I found the Lord Jesus. It was in the coal pits and beside the coffin of my daughter. If they think that theology is a sort of cotton wool which will keep them safe in the great and terrible day, they'll find their mistake. For mark my words, this thing is going to happen. The kingdom is going to arrive in this world, in this country. The powers of science are an instrument, an irresistible instrument, as are all of us in the nice. And what are they? And why are they an irresistible instrument? So this is the Strake is the sort of priest who's aligned with the nice,
mhm.
and they have this back and forth. He says, I knew that he, meaning Jesus, it was coming to power, and therefore, where we see power, we see the sign of his coming. So this
Mhm.
priest has become convinced that the nice and its power and its influence is a sign of his power and influence. Just a subtitle from Renee Worms's book there, Foundations, their power and influence, is a sign of Jesus's return. He says, you have no choice whether you will be used or not. There is no turning back once you have set your hand to the plow. No one goes out of the nice. Those who try to turn back will perish in the wilderness.
You know, there's something else too. The Strake, even though he's, kind of the Bible thumper aligned with this unsavory organization, he's also representing, Carol Quigley saying we work with all groups, and it comes up again, it comes up in
Mm.
Foundations, Their Power and Influence as to how they use different groups. Does it matter, religion, whatever, it doesn't matter in order to bring this about. And he said, um, he's railing here and he's saying all of us in the nice know that science, the powers of science are an instrument. And why are they an irresistible instrument, he asks. And Mark hazards a guess here, because science is based on observation. They are an irresistible instrument because they are an instrument in his hand, an instrument of judgment as well as healing. And that is why I couldn't get any of the churches to see. They're blinded, blinded by their filthy rags of humanism, their culture and humanitarianism and liberalism, as well as by their sins or what they think they're sins, though they really are really the least sinful thing about them. That is why I have come to stand alone, a poor, weak, unworthy man, but the only prophet left. I knew that he was coming in power. And then he goes on and he says, that is why I find myself joining with communists and materialists and
Mm.
anyone else who is really ready to expedite the coming. The feeblest of these people here has the tragic sense of life, the ruthlessness, the total commitment, the readiness to sacrifice all merely human values, which I could not find among all the nauseating cant of the organized religions. So that, this is a very interesting thing there that there's no such thing as cooperation or humanity. It's all whatever brings about this power that
Yeah,
he's in
every
favor
group will
of.
be used and they'll cooperate
Hmm.
with any group, and
Yeah.
if it serves their needs and their goals, that reminds me of someone else wrote that as well somewhere. But it's it's escaping me, but I was reading something recently about somebody being beyond the political, like they were basically saying they would work with the left or the right. They didn't care, because they were above and beyond it. It was some, I don't know, some diplomat, or might have been Brzezinski, somebody like that was basically just saying, I'm not bothered if you're on the left or the right.
Yeah.
Because I'm what I'm working on is above and beyond that. I think it might have been the a stream. I think it might have been. Oh, it was Milner. That's it. It was Milner.
Ah,
Milner was saying the same thing. There was a quote in. I was reading some books on Sunday just gone. It was Remembrance Day, 9/11 here in the UK, and I read some books about the origins of the First World War, hidden history, Lord Milner's Second War. Um, yeah, and there was a quote in there of Milner saying the same sort of thing. Just yeah, I've got. He said, I've got objects in my heart, and I'll work with anybody. I don't care what their label is to get these
yeah,
objects done.
yeah. Now I haven't I've made a couple more notes on chapter 4, but the next thing that comes up is an insight into Mark's mind.
Hmm.
His his education had the curious effect. Oh, well, I should set this up. Are they in a bar? Are they walking in the village? I think they're walking in the village, and he's not observing anything. He doesn't notice anything. I said, for his education had the curious effect of making things that he read and wrote more real to him than
Yeah,
things he saw. And it goes on to talk about this a little bit. And it said, um, statistics about agricultural laborers were the substance. Any real ditcher, plowman, or farmer's boy, that was a shadow. Though he had never noticed it himself, he had a great reluctance in his work ever to use words such as man or woman. He preferred to write about vocational groups, elements, classes, populations. For in his own way, he believed as firmly as any mystic in the superior reality of the things that are not seen. Like,
so, and this
yeah.
contrasts beautifully with Jane, right? Because she's
Hmm.
the opposite way. She's
Hmm.
in the body, the physical, the 3D
Hmm.
world, the what you can see and touch and smell, what's tangible, what's real, and he's the other way. So it's that left brain, right brain kind of
Hmm.
tension, and he's fully left and she's fully right, and this is why they're not. Neither of them have balance, and they're not empathizing and meeting each other in the middle and seeing that they're not sort of complementing each other because of this. Yeah, it's really well done, and the kind of the setup as well to that scene is that Cossa and Mark are writing a report. He actually gets pulled into a bit of work in about a village called Cure Hardy, and Cossa kind of gets him to do this report about how this village. What are they going to do to it? They're going to do something to it, aren't they? Like knock it down and rebuild it somewhere
Hmm.
else, something
Hmm.
similar. And they
Hmm.
basically want to make a report that lays the case out because it's a picturesque. That's it. It's a picturesque little village, and that they're walking around it. And Mark's not seeing anything of value to preserve. They go to visit there, don't they? To research
Hmm.
and write this report on Cure Hardy. Mark doesn't see anything worth preserving, and then it's a famous old village, but sorry, not Curry. Cossa says there's going to be a stink about this place getting knocked down and rebuilt somewhere else. And then he teaches him how to like write the spin in this report. So he says, if it's a beauty spot, you can bet it's insanitary. That's the first point to stress. Then we've got to get some facts about the population. I think you'll find it consists almost entirely of those undesirable elements, small rentiers and agricultural laborers. The Institute doesn't approve of the agricultural laborer. He's a very recalcitrant element in a planned community, and he's always backward. Yeah. So this is his sort of first taste of work, and he feels really good about himself when he gets this uh, report written. But then this is what it becomes apparent is that Mark is actually chosen and recruited not for his sociology expertise, it's actually for his writing ability. And they see in him a talent and a skill, probably because he doesn't use these words such as man and woman, and he prefers using these academic terms, which are vague and mystical, not mystical, but it's a certain tonality and language that hides reality, I would say, right? Elements and
Hmm.
vocational groups and all this
Hmm.
stuff. It's the corporatese might be a way of talking about it,
Hmm.
of describing it.
Or
And the
bureaucraties.
bureaucraties, yes. And they realize he's very good at this, and that's how he writes. And he's not writing with emotion, and he's not writing with any sort of sense of um, what's the word? There's a word. I'm forgetting my words tonight, all over the place. What's going on? Where you are romanticizing something, right? None of that. None of the flowery language, descriptive language,
And
emotive language. None of that. It's cold. It's calculating. It is
statistical.
clinical,
Yeah, yeah,
statistical. Yeah, that's why he's been hired, because
yeah.
he'll be able to write this kind of stuff and gloss over and leave out all the emotional and all the human side of it and the suffering and the stress and the strife and all that that might cause people to push back against the nice, right? He's kind of a what do you call it? We call them in the UK, the political parties always have these guys who spin doctor.
Hmm. Hmm.
Don't know if there's anything else in the rest of that chapter.
Not so much for me. The in chapter five, he's just desperate to get an understanding of what his duties are going to be, and more than that, will he be paid and by whom and with what regularity, and can he go ahead and leave the college, and so the practicalities of this arrangement he's pressing to find out, and nobody wants to tell him this, and this becomes increasingly angry, upsetting to him. He becomes increasingly angry about it.
And he goes in, doesn't he, against everybody's advice to confront the director, the
Hmm.
DD, as he
Yeah.
gets referred to. And there's also an interesting, he finds out as well that his college have been told by Feverstone that he's resigning,
Hmm.
and he hasn't made that decision yet. And but Feverstone's obviously just dropping that hint. So he's writing a letter to address this, and he's worrying, oh, if I tell them that I'm not resigning, then I'm going to lose
Hmm.
my position here at the NICE. Yeah, it's really frustrating. It's kind of Kafka-esque,
Hmm.
I would
Very
say,
much
his
so.
experiences.
Yeah.
And
So there's a place here. This is where I somehow I missed Army. Did I miss Army 97? Yeah, okay. Um, so while he's trying to figure out what his title is going to be, who he answers to, who's going to pay him, Miss Hardcastle comes to him with an assignment. And she says here, now I need you to get a bit of work going. This is what you've really been brought here to do. And she says, let's see, they're going to have, I can't find where she first introduces this man, but it's Alcazan. She
Yeah.
said, Alcazan. You know who I'm talking about, don't you? And Mark said, You mean the radiologist, the man who was guillotined? He's completely bewildered. And the fairy nodded and said, Well, he's to be rehabilitated gradually. I've got all the facts in the dossier. You begin with a quiet little article, not questioning his guilt, not at first, but just hinting that, of course, he was a member of their quisling government and there was a prejudice against him. Say you don't doubt the verdict was just, but it's disquieting to realize that it would almost certainly have been the same even if he'd been innocent. Then you follow it up. So she's telling him how to write, what to write for the papers. You follow it up in a day or two with an article of a quite different kind, popular account of the value of his work, and you can mug up the facts, enough of that kind of article in the afternoon, and then a letter, rather indignant, to the paper that printed the first article, going much further. The execution was a miscarriage of justice. And then Mark interrupts and says, What on earth is the point of all of this? I'm telling you, Studdick, Al-Kassan is to be rehabilitated, made into a martyr, an irreparable loss to the human race. But what for? There you go again. You grumble about being given nothing to do, and as soon as I suggest a bit of real work, you expect to have the whole plan of campaign told you before you do it. It doesn't make sense. That's not the way to get on here. The great thing is to do what you're told. If you turn out to be any good, you'll soon understand what's going on, but you've got to begin by doing the work. You don't seem to realize what we are. We're an army. And I wrote in the margin, Legion, and this is going to come up again. We are Legion,
Yeah.
and that's the beehive. And
Yeah.
he just hasn't quite cottoned on to how to behave. And they're looking for him. What they wanted when Feverson suggested him was the kind of yes man lackey that they all observed him to be at the college in the presence of Curry and the progressives. They just want that guy who's willing to suck up just for a little bit of glory and a little bit of light and oh,
Hmm.
I'm in the in crowd. And he's not behaving like that so far. He wants things
But
on the dotted line.
but it does happen, doesn't it?
Hmm.
He ends up in another little in crowd. They meet in the library. Um, and and then he feels like, okay, now I'm really part of something. And
Yes.
Alcazan,
Yeah.
we should mention as well, Alcazan is the prisoner who's in Jane's dream in chapter one,
Yes.
who has the pince nez wearing perfect mouth character Freud come in and twist his head off and carry it away, right?
Yeah.
But that's and then and then she reads in the newspaper the following morning, and she sees that his face, this Alcazan's face, and that's what freaks her out about the dream because she's like, "Oh, it must be yesterday's paper," but it's not. It's just been delivered, so there's no
Yeah.
way she could have seen that face
Hmm.
before having the dream, and this is
Hmm.
what sets her journey off. But that's Alcazan. So, yeah, this is brilliant. This bit, and he's introduced to the work he has to do. You can write. That's one of the things you're wanted for. Um, and then this bit, right, a bit further down,
Hmm.
he's talking about, I'm not interested in the policies of the nice. And she says, haven't you been told that it's strictly non-political? He says, I've been told so many things. I don't know whether I'm on my head or my heels. Is it left or right papers that are going to print all this rot about Alcazan? Both, honey, both, said Miss Harcastle. Don't you understand anything? Isn't it absolutely essential to keep a fierce left and a fierce right, both on their toes and each terrified of the other? That's how we get things done. An opposition to the nice is represented as a left racket in the right papers and a right racket in the left papers. If it's properly done, you get each side outbidding the other in support of us to refute the enemy slanders. Of course, we're non political. The real power always is. That fits so
Absolutely.
nice and synchronistically with the quote I read about Milner on the
Mm-hmm.
Sunday's stream.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the dialectic,
Absolutely.
the left, right, blue team, red team. It's amazing
Yeah,
how much is revealed in this.
it is. It is. And Mark goes on right after she says that. He said, I don't believe you can do that. Not with the papers that are read by educated people. And Miss Hardcastle says, that shows you're still in the nursery, lovey. Haven't you realized that it's the other way round? Mark said, how do you mean? Why, you fool. It's the educated reader who can be gulled. All our difficulty comes with the others. When did you meet a workman who believes the papers? He takes it for granted that they're all propaganda and skips the leading articles. He buys his paper for the football results and the little paragraphs about girls falling out of windows and corpses found in Mayfair flats. He is our problem. We have to recondition him. But the educated public, the people who read the highbrow weeklies, don't need reconditioning. They're all right already. They'll believe anything. And I love,
It's so good.
it is so good. Alan always said this. He always, said, "What is the purpose of, the cap and gown and the squaring of the head?" And he'd say it's exactly the same thing. The people who are most ready to comply, who want to get along, who want to be accepted by their peer group, it's the educated classes.
Well, I remember during Big C, there was reports about how the people who were most questioning were it was kind of a bell curve. Everyone in
Hmm.
the middle was going along, but it was the people with the least amount of formal education and the people with the very highest like PhD levels of formal education who were the where you would find the most dissent and the most questioning. And then most of the people who'd done maybe secondary school, college for us is kind of high school for you, but college,
Hmm.
university, degree level, most of that in the middle of that curve. Maybe it's not a curve, is it? But you get what I'm saying. That like at the extremes was where you would find the descent, where most people sat in the middle with your average schooling and your average education levels, and a bit above and a bit below. There was compliance and people going along with it. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, that just shows you that that whole system of schooling, of trivia and remembering information and regurgitating it in exams and getting a pat on the head for doing this is
Hmm.
that is what it's preparing you for. It's preparing you for obedience. It's
Yep.
preparing you for sit down, stand up, request permission to go to the toilet, work 9 to 5. It's amazing. So quite an impressive revelation there. It's fantastic. I think we're gonna probably have to stop at this chapter 5.
Okay.
Uh, looking at the time.
Okay.
So what else?
All right. So I'm just going to see where does chapter 5 end and where does
He's been
chapter.
conditioned. Sorry, I'm just reading that bit again. It says, "Don't you see the educated reader can't stop? He's been conditioned."
Yep. Yeah.
So it's the uneducated who need to be reconditioned, but the educated have already been conditioned by their education. That is the purpose of education,
Yeah.
is to do the conditioning.
Yeah. I love
This is
that's
great
so
little,
good.
and then there's a great insight into Mark's character. The confidential tone in which she had been speaking up till now had disappeared, and there was a threatening finality in her voice because she actually says earlier on as well she says a couple of pages before, you've got two options, either be in the nice or be out of it.
Hmm.
And I know better than you which is going to be most fun. So it's
Hmm.
you're with us or against us, isn't it? It's George Bush's thing. You're either with us or against
Yes.
us.
Yeah.
And then he says, and then his conscience, his weak little conscience does a
Uh-huh.
little flicker, and it says, the citizen and the honest man, which had been awakened in Mark by the conversation, quailed a little. His other and far stronger self, the self that was anxious at all costs not to be placed among the outsiders, leaped up, fully alarmed. because he wants to fit in. He wants that
Hmm.
approval. He looks up to the power and the influence. He looks up to the prestige and the titles and the money, and
Hmm.
he wants that. He wants that
Yeah.
more than being honest, more than being truthful, more than contributing to the good and the right and the beautiful of life. That's what he wants. So it's kind of ego driven in that sense.
He even says there in this section here, he says he's got no problem with vivisection. We're back, to the experimentation. He's got no problem with that. His main problem is he's kind of a red tape guy. He wants it all on the dotted line, and then he gets a letter from Bracton College. We're sorry to hear from Dick, that's Lord Feverstone, that you're resigning your fellowship. And that letter goes on for a while, and
Mm,
he's saying, you don't have to do it right away, but explaining the politics of how he can help find his successor. And this completely freaks Mark out because he hasn't been told what his duties are exactly, how much money he's going to make, and who's going to pay him, who he answers to. And so he writes back a letter saying, I don't know where Feverson got this idea, but I have no intention of resigning my fellowship. And then Feverson comes in to the nice. I don't know if they're at the cafeteria or whatever. Yeah, they must be. And so he has this back and forth where he's trying to hold Feverson accountable for taking away his fellowship. He said, I never told you that I was resigning that. And Feverson says, oh, well, didn't you? So it's back and how did you do this? And you have to help me get that fellowship back. I'm going to need you to go and say, oh, you must have misunderstood. And Feverson says, I find your style of conversation rather difficult. And then he tells him how it's going to be. He said, you'll come up for reelection in a few months. The college may decide to reelect you, or of course it may not. As far as I can make out, you are at present attempting to canvass my vote in advance, to which the proper answer is the one I give you now. Go to hell. And Mark says, there was no doubt about my reelection until you spoke a word in Curry's ear. So, of course, Feverson knows all of this is true, but he's very good at playing the game because we saw this in Out of the Silent Planet. He's the penultimate politician, and that's
mm,
why he's at the nice. And he says here, this is a perfect line that I had to just look up and confirm that I was remembering it correctly and do a little homework. He said, you make me rather tired. If you don't know how to steer your own course in a place like Bracton, why come and pester me? I'm not a bucking nurse, and for your own good, I would advise you, in talking to people here, to adopt a more agreeable manner than you are using now. Otherwise, your life may be, in the famous words, nasty, poor, brutish, and short. Now, what that line actually is solitary, nasty, poor, brutish, and short. And that's Thomas Hobbes, the
mm,
philosopher who is saying that the natural life is abhorrent, that only a life with government and with order and bureaucracy is a life that is worth living. Man in a state of nature, uh-uh, for Hobbes.
And thus Mark knew that if he lost the Belbury job, he would lose his fellowship at Bracton as well. And there's a little bit before that as well that talks about wheels within wheels. And there was even a bit earlier on, which he gets frustrated after the conversation with Miss Hardcastle. He goes for a walk, and then he hears like a building full of animals and all these animal noises coming out of there, doesn't he?
Hmm.
And that's yeah,
Hmm.
that's the bit where you mentioned where he says he has no scruples about vivisection.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
actually impressed by the this warehouse full of animals. There were all sorts of living things in there, thousands of pounds worth of living animality,
Mhm.
which the institute could afford to cut up like paper on the mere chance of some interesting discovery. He must get the job. He must somehow solve the problem of steel. But the noise was disagreeable, and he moved away. So,
All right. Well, since we're not going to get to chapter 6, we are almost at the end of chapter 5. And it's a good stopping point here just to say a few things um, that she is finding out. She hasn't yet met the director. She's gone into her own world where there is a director, not the DD,
oh, this
not
is
the.
Jane.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is Jane. So she then is being talked to by Camilla Deniston. And she says, "Oh, we were just going to come around and see you and take you to lunch." And they're discussing, um, you know, her situation with the dreams, and they're sitting together and talking. And her husband, Deniston, says, "Well, I suppose I better begin. You know, of course, where we've come from, Mrs. Studdock." "From Miss Ironwood's?" said Jane. "Well, from the same house, but we don't belong to Grace Ironwood. She she and we both belong to someone else." "Yes," said Jane. "Our little household or company or society or whatever you like to call it is run by a Mr. Fisher King." Great name. At least that's the name he has recently taken. You might or might not know his original name if I told it to you. He is a great traveler, but he's now an invalid. He got a wound on his foot on his last journey, which won't heal. So we find out how he's come to get the name Mr. Fisher King, but Mr. Fisher King is Ransom.
Mhm.
And then so we got Arthur and Camilla. So we're starting to get the names of the setup of this company that Jane finds herself because of her dreams, her precognitive dreams, is coming to be drawn into this group. And she learns that Ransom, who is also called Mr. Fisher King, is also referred to as the Pendragon. So he is the chief, the biggest dragon, the head dragon. And so this is the world that they're telling her about. She hasn't yet been brought into this fold, but they're,
But
giving her a little,
just that they say the same thing. You don't you see, Broken Camilla, that you can't be neutral. And this is the same thing that is said to Mark. Is like
yeah,
you were gonna be on a side. There is
yeah.
no just sitting on the fence and seeing which way it goes. You're in the fight. You're in the battle. You're in the war, and that's true. That is true for all of us. That is true.
Hmm.
We've talked about it before in our videos, but the times we're living in is there. We're on the battlefield, and you can either put your hands in your ears and la 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 la, close your eyes and pretend it's not going on around you, and head in the sand, which in this day and age is that really just the glowing rectangle of various sizes and that we have access to, or you get involved and you
Hmm.
speak up and you do something and you have some creative output in some way, shape, or form that best fits your skills and abilities and talents and aptitudes, right? And so, again, just another wonderful um, truth about reality that he's captured in these books,
Hmm.
and Camilla's making that plea to Jane: if you
So
don't
the
give yourself to us, the enemy will use you.
That's right. And so now we've got the setup here is Mark is being brought into the inner sanctum of the nice, and he's being kind of an idiot about it, but haggling over who's his boss and what's he going to get paid, and being told how it is by everybody, by the fairy, by the deputy director Withers, by
And
Feverstone.
just a note on how much he gets paid. Originally, it's 1,500 a year,
Hmm.
and he's like, "Wow, can't even like that." That it makes him excited, this number of money. But because of his fussing and his demanding to know how much, what the role is, and pestering the DD, it ends up getting reduced to 600 a year, and he
Uh-huh.
still is like snaps their finger off and accepts it. but
Yeah.
because of his inconvenience and Feverstone, what Feverstone said to him, and what Fairy Hardcastle says, oh, these questions you're asking, it's no good.
Yeah.
He loses favor with the DD, and it gets dropped down to 600 a year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
Good.
quite a
Good.
drop, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he still takes it. He's still like, yeah, yeah, fine, I'll do it.
Yeah. Yes, because so far he doesn't have any moral fiber. But and so Jane's being brought into her fold and told, so we've got the husband and the wife in two separate camps. And that's we when we reconvene, when we are able to record again, which might be next week, we'll see how it goes. But we will be starting with chapter 6, and that is called Fog. And things in these next few chapters, things are going to take a very different turn here.
Yeah, I've read chapter 6, and there's a lot of good stuff in there.
There is,
So
and we
it's
wanted to talk about it, but we've run out of time. So,
yes, my Wi-Fi is about to switch itself off in about 5 minutes. But
okay.
yeah, what a great setup! I think we covered. I think yeah, 5 chapters was the right amount, and it was. I'm really glad we had this conversation because I hadn't quite been holding their marriage as so central, and the left and the left brain, right brain, emotional, intellectual, the heart, the mind, this sort of dynamic being so central. I hadn't really been thinking of it like that. I was just so focused on the nice and how amazingly it described
Oh,
the foundations
absolutely.
and the institutions and the mindset of the kinds of people who are dominating the planet, the scientific elite, right? So really glad we had this conversation. It certainly snapped some more things into focus about this book, and I'm very eager indeed to carry on. Maybe we'll do another 5 chapters next time. We'll see kind of where we get to.
Okay. Well, good deal. Well, hurry up and read, and
I need to catch up. I know I'm lagging behind.
yeah. Okay. So, if you, let's see, this is going up on the 20th, and if Nick, see, it's all on Nick now. If Nick gets his reading done, then we'll record this and it'll go up, I think, the Friday after Thanksgiving, because here it's a big deal and everybody's coming for pie and turkey and all that stuff. But and if it doesn't go up, if we don't get that up, then there probably won't be anything on Thanksgiving, and we'll shoot for the following week or so. But we'll keep reading, so you can keep reading too.
I will do. Yeah,
All
looking
right.
forward to it. I can't wait to see how this unfolds.
Okay. Thank you all so much for coming along on this novel experience.
Thanks, everybody.